The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
The Baltimore Ravens pull off an unreal comeback over the Cincinnati Bengals.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
That was like Stress City. That was Stress City. And luckily we're talking about a win. Luckily we're talking about a great comeback. But like I'm sitting there and I'm loving it. Then I'm not. Then I'm loving it again. Then I'm not. And we're just feeling every single emotion. And it was I am drained. I am absolutely drained, but you know what? We're gonna be hype here on Locked On Ravens, and then we're also gonna be not hype about some of the things as well because, man, rough game for some aspects of this team and a great game for other aspects. Again, 35-34 the final score. I knew when the Bengals were walking down the Ravens, there was no doubt in my mind that the Bengals were going for two. They were never going to give the ball back to Lamar Jackson. Right? They were never going to give the ball back to Lamar. Not after he ended up getting on a roll. The Bengals defense played, I'll give them credit. First half, they played well. But I want to give the MVP of this game, Lamar Jackson, obviously, he did great. The MVP of this game was Marlon Humphrey. He was the one that won this game for the Baltimore Ravens. And we'll talk about the defense as a whole. And I'm going to be the first to say that I don't think the Ravens can win a Super Bowl if the defense plays this way. It's not a hot take or anything. I think everybody would agree with me. But the defense has real issues. And no, you're not going to play Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase again. I think the Ravens all but dashed their playoff hopes. But Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are not the only good wide receiver quarterback duo that you're going to have to face. And those other teams have other good stars and an offensive line that's not Cincinnati's and a better run game, if we're being honest. But, I mean, they got the job done to me. But I think that Marlon Humphrey play, Bengals are up 21-7 with the ball, and Chase Brown gets that ball ripped out from Marlon. Ravens get the ball back and pretty much immediately score. That's when the game turned. You could see Chase Brown was running pretty scared for the majority of the game, and that was the play that turned it. But, I mean, we have to start with Lamar Jackson just from a general perspective here. This man is the MVP. I don't want anybody else to debate it, right? I don't want to do that, right? We're not talking about anybody else for MVP. It's Lamar Jackson. I'm just pulling up the official. I have the unupdated box score stats. I'm quickly going to get the actual updated box score stats. Somehow this game was better than the other one. Like somehow this game, we were like, okay, is another Cincinnati Ravens game this season really going to live up to the one that we watched in week 5? And all of a sudden, this one is just better. This one is just better. And Maximilian, I agree with you. I don't know if it'd be 0-10, but it'd be pretty close. It'd be pretty close. Lamar is a superhero, puts on that cape so many times. And this team without Lamar Jackson is not a good team, right? I think we can all say that. So Lamar Jackson on the day, 25-33, 290 yards with 4 touchdowns, almost had an interception, but it did not count. The ball hit the ground. Lamar struggled in the first half. The whole offense struggled in the first half. I thought the play calling wasn't good from Tom Lunkin in the first half. I thought the Bengals defense was able to take the Ravens out of a rhythm. They were stopping Derrick Henry. There were penalties on the Ravens. Speaking of the officiating in this game was just awful. Absolutely atrocious. Both sides, if we're being honest. The Ravens had terrible calls against them. The Bengals had terrible calls against them. There were no calls that both teams should have gotten. Get those officials out, man. I never want to see that officiating crew again. Just a terrible, horrible display of officiating from that officiating crew all the way across the board. I mean, the Ravens got a couple of penalties on them that weren't. There were ticky-tack calls, and then you got the Bengals, who the refs missed a couple of calls against the Ravens on them, and the Ravens, they have a couple calls that are missed against them. It was terrible. But regardless, Lamar Jackson ended up putting the team on his back, and you can tell, like, once Lamar gets in a rhythm, it's almost impossible to stop him. And I thought that both teams, again, this was like the first game, both teams horribly coached, multiple moments, awful. John Harbaugh in the first first drive of the game, challenges a 2-yard completion. I think it was Mike Gesicki. So much happened since that challenge. I think it was Gesicki. And it clearly was a catch. He lost the ball going out of bounds, but he was already down. And John Harbaugh challenges that play. Then they have to waste another timeout because they have 12 men on the field. And hey, guess what? Would have been nice to have timeouts at the end of the half, right? Would have been nice to have timeouts. So that ends up costing the Ravens. Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow. I mean, look, Joe Burrow played phenomenal, right? I have, nothing bad to say about him and his performance. But that sequence, the Ravens were up, or they were down by 7 at that time? 3rd and 4, the Bengals go 2 deep shots on 3rd and 4th down. Don't even kick the field goal. Or maybe Ravens were down by 1. That was when Tucker missed the extra point, I think. Ravens were down by 1. And to me, you go over the middle of the field. The Ravens defense got cooked the whole game over the middle of the field, right? All over the middle of the field. And the Bengals decided to go for deep shots. I mean, look, this is going to be maybe a little harsh. Zach Taylor's the worst coach in the NFL. Worst coach in the NFL. Deserved to be fired, honestly, maybe even 2 years ago. And the big thing there was the Bengals couldn't get out of their own way. Neither could the Ravens in some aspects, right? I mean, 11 penalties. And I see DRB, appreciate you putting this in the chat. 11 penalties compared to the Bengals 3. So it tells you a little bit about the officiating on the night. But Zach Taylor, to me, there are a lot of bad coaches. Zach Taylor, by far and away, the worst coach in the league. And there's no way he returns to Cincinnati next season. You can bookmark that. You can clip it up. Zach Taylor's awful. Now, that benefits the Ravens, and I'll take it. I'm like, hey, Ravens can capitalize on that Zach Taylor incompetency. Hey, man, I'll take that 10 times out of 10. Joe Burrow, by the way, had to throw the ball 56 times in this game. 56 times. The Bengals have no run game whatsoever. Chase Brown only 3.2 yards per carry in this one. Khalil Herbert had a fumble on his only rush of the game. I don't even think they counted it as a rush because he fumbled the ball. So I think for the Ravens, I'm trying to catch myself, if we're being honest here. And I see Bean Man here does not feel like a win. I feel like it was a win in some aspects, but it wasn't in other aspects. I totally feel what you're saying here. I totally understand this because defensively, it felt like they lost this game 10 times over. The defense is terrible. And look, we're 10 weeks into the season now. The trade deadline's done. Nobody else is walking through that door, right? It is what it is, unless you do get rid of Zach Orr, which personally I don't anticipate happening. I know there are a lot of calls for that. But as much as I want to talk about the offense in this first part of the show, I mean, Joe Burrow's incredible. Jamar Chase is incredible, right? Those are 2 perennial players at their positions, and we need to respect them as such, right? I get that. They have no one else on that offense. T. Higgins, out. Orlando Brown Jr., out. Zach Moss, out. And the Ravens gave up 34 points to that Bengals team. Now, that speaks to how good Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are. Jamar had 264 receiving yards in this game. Your one job as a defense. We've talked about this both times on this show. The one job that this defense had was stop Jamar Chase. Let anybody else but Jamar Chase beat you, and Jamar Chase almost single-handedly took this team down with Joe Burrow. That is what it is. That's what it's been. Where the Ravens have a simple job and they cannot execute it. It's on Zach Orr. It's on the defenders. It's on everybody, right? I'm not putting all the blame on Zach Orr. I'm not putting all the blame on the players. It is a combination of both. Now, the Ravens missed Kyle Hamilton in this game. I'm not sure if we have an update yet from John Harbaugh. I'm sure we won't. I'm sure the Ravens will take this completely into next week, and we might not hear anything about Kyle Hamilton. Obviously looked really bad when it first happened. Right here we go. John Harbaugh said Kyle Hamilton sprained his ankle, and he did not consider it to be a serious injury. Wow. Awesome. That looked bad. Wow. That looked bad at the first. But look, if they don't have Hamilton against the Steelers and the Eagles, that could get ugly pretty quickly, right? But look, let's be honest. The Ravens weren't really stopping the Bengals with Hamilton on the field either. Hamilton's a big fix for a lot of things, but he can't play as much as he can play all over the field. He can't play everywhere, right? So, hey, man, it's a win. The Ravens won the game. They're 7-3. They could easily right now be, 4-5? No, 5-5. They could easily be 5-5 and be 0-3 in the division. but instead they're 7-3 and 2-1 in the division, and that will help them. I can't even tell you how many worlds that helps them moving into the postseason race as we are, getting ready. But hey, this is unfortunately the second straight year that Kyle Hamilton has gotten injured in a primetime game. Obviously, the first one being the MCL last season, and the second one being this one. So again, the Ravens have a mini bye. He got 10 days to heal up now before that big Pittsburgh game. Hopefully he'll be good to go. But yeah, man, I've been all over the place. I'm sure everybody watching this is all over the place. And we have a lot more to dive into because we have a lot of defensive stuff to talk about. Let's just round out the offense first here, though. Derrick Henry didn't do much of anything in this game. I thought Cincinnati actually did a very good job stopping him. 4.3 yards per carry for Derrick Henry on the day, 16 for 68 and a touchdown. Lamar 7 for 33. Hey, I'll give credit to Cincy's defense. They did their job when it came to stopping the Ravens run game for the most part. I mean, Lamar really, he only really got going on that one play where he almost got in the end zone on that crazy runaround game. Hey man, let's give a shout out to Tylan Wallace though. I'm giving claps all around to Tylan Wallace right now. 3 for 115. And again, when I talk about Cincinnati also couldn't get out of their own way, just atrocious tackling. Tylan Wallace goes 84 yards to the house, tiptoes down that sideline. That's effort versus no effort, right? Bengals were trying to shove him out of bounds. I thought the play was over, not running to the ball. Tylan Wallace made him pay. And I feel so happy for Tylan Wallace. He's had a couple of really big moments over the course of his career. Doesn't have a ton of moments, but his moments are really, really loud when they happen. And in a good way. That's a good thing. I think Tylan has been, when called upon, a really great piece for them. And hey, this might be a hot take. I'd rather see him over Deontay Johnson. Rough go of it for Deontay. Got tackled right before the end of the half in bounds, wasn't able to get out, and then obviously fell down on a throw by Lamar that probably would have been a first down. So did have a 6-yard catch in this one. Mark Andrews, 6 for 68 and a score. Let's revisit quickly. Mark Andrews back, right? We were talking about Mark Andrews and Justin Tucker. Those guys looked a little iffy early in the season. Mark Andrews all the way back. Justin Tucker, we'll have to talk about that one a little later because I don't feel great about that. But we'll revisit that in a couple of minutes. Bateman, a couple of big catches. Did have that one drop, but a couple of big catches. 6 for 54 and a touchdown for Rashad. Zay, 4 for 34. The Bengals did a good job of containing him. Zay made a couple guys miss, but I thought the game plan for Cincy was really anyone but Zay, and the Ravens took advantage of that. Inconsistent day for the offense, but at the end of the day, Lamar ends up going crazy. I believe that is now 6 straight games of Lamar Jackson going over 275 yards. Just unreal stuff. He had a rating of 141 in this game. He was doing everything for this team.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could be on an early Week 11 line in the NFL. There's a theory that teams get a bump from firing a coach, but what happens when they fire a coach and trade one of their best players? FanDuel is kind of buying the fired coach hype, as it feels like the New Orleans Saints aren't as much of an underdog as you might expect to the Atlanta Falcons. The game is in New Orleans, but the FanDuel has the Falcons favored by 3.5 points. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
It's hard to think of anything more frustrating than watching Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase do what they did and lose.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast.
And James, Joe Burrow, 428, 4 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, 264, 3 of those touchdowns. A scorching performance from those guys on a day when, boy, it felt like no one else showed up.
Yeah, it was the Joe and Jamar show. They put the team on their back, and it wasn't enough. I mean, there's so many things to dive into and to discuss. The way this team came out and they take the lead early, and then they come out in the third quarter and really seize the momentum, and then the everything after that, where it felt like the Ravens were just going to run away with the game, scoring 21 straight. And Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase said, "You're not. That's not what's going to happen. We're too good. We're too talented." And they damn near won the game. And you come up a play short, a decision short, an error short, and you weave in there an MVP in Lamar Jackson, the worst tackling in NFL history on an 84-yard touchdown that I'm sure we'll get to. Like there was a mixture of errors, lack of playmaking, and then there was Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And that's how good they are. Is it got to 35-34, and the Bengals decide to go for 2 there. I think that's a huge storyline. So let's kind of start there. What did you think about that when Joe Burrow somehow finds Jamar Chase? Jamar Chase gets open again after going for, I think he was at 259 at that time, with a 67-yard touchdown and a 70-yard touchdown in the second half. And Joe finds Jamar for a touchdown that made it 35-34 with 37 seconds left in the fourth quarter.
That was Jamar's 10th touchdown of the year, correct? 10 touchdowns through 10 games. That's pretty good. Incredible throw. And that's beating the coverage that he nearly threw the pick on earlier, or a very similar coverage where he's essentially got 3 defenders over 2 receivers and they're trying to high-low, but then there's 2 defenders that he ends up high-lowing, and then they both go high, and then he throws it over them anyway. I mean, it's as perfect as a throw can be, and Jamar Chase running that route well enough to get behind those 2 guys. I mean, that play is perfection. The play that follows it is very frustrating that they don't convert the 2-point conversion. Maybe it's even frustrating that they take the timeout, but the decision to go for 2 at the time I supported, and I think I still support. And here's my rationale. There's 38 seconds left or something in
37.
the game.
Yep.
And you're kicking the ball back to the Ravens either way. You're either kicking the ball back to the Ravens with a 1-point lead or a 1-point deficit, as they did, or you're kicking the ball back to the Ravens in a tie game. Either with a 1-point lead or in a tie game. The Ravens with 2 timeouts. Is that right at that point?
That is right. They had 2.
Okay, so 2 timeouts left for the Ravens, who just need to get to Justin Tucker range to win the game either way in regulation. The only reason you don't go for 2 there, because at that point, do you have any confidence in the defense to get a stop in overtime if you need to? You've given up 4 straight touchdowns after Chase Brown's fumble.
Yep.
I don't. So you give yourself a chance to win in regulation if you make the 2-point conversion. You give yourself a chance that Baltimore doesn't have enough time to get into field goal range, which maybe they do either way. But that chance is just as present, even in a tie game, if they kick the extra point. And this is why I landed on still being in support of the decision to go for 2, even if the outcome isn't what we wanted there, because even in a tie game, the Ravens have a chance to go win it in regulation. The only argument that you can make is that maybe the Ravens are a little bit less aggressive in a tie game, knowing that they have overtime to fall back on. But I just don't buy it. I think the Ravens are trying their hardest to win in regulation, regardless of that play. So I think that's why I land on it being totally fine and where I was initially on trying to win the game in regulation with your best players, which are Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Unfortunately, the play didn't go to Jamar there, but yeah, I think I end up fine with it.
I'm more than fine with it. In fact, it would have been the opposite. Had Zach kicked the extra point to tie it, I would have been extremely critical.
Yeah.
The same way I would have been critical, or was critical, of Tampa Bay against Kansas City and what happened on Monday night. And it's pretty similar. I think the difference in really, because there's a lot of people that say kick it. And so now they're rolling their eyes at us because we agree. To me, when did you feel more comfortable? When Lamar Jackson had the ball and he was laughing after throwing an incompletion to get to third down at the 5-yard line. The clock stops and he's just giggling like he's playing flag football and has no worry in the world about picking it up on third down, picking up the touchdown. And he did, by the way, the jump shot to Rashad Bateman.
And it looks like child's play.
It does. And so what was more uncomfortable or scarier, Lamar or were you more comfortable with the defense on the field or the offense? I was more comfortable with the offense and Joe Burrow. Even on 4th and 10, I was like, I don't think he's just going to throw 4 straight incompletions. Like, I think he's going to complete something here. Will it be enough to get to the sticks? And he got it right to the sticks with Yosevash. But yeah, like, trust Joe. trust what you have and go for it. I totally get it. Go for 2, get it, and then your defense can be aggressive and be like, all right, we got to get a stop here and we win the game. And it is that simple. It doesn't mean send everyone on an all-out blitz. That's not what I mean. But be aggressive as in you're 3 plays away from ending the game, 4 plays away from ending the game. You don't know that if it's tied. And so I have no issues with going for it. I have issues with how the play went down because Mike Gesicki is just tackled, basically. I mean, grabbed by at least 2 guys. And Joe Burrow, I mean, I think his helmet's still being grabbed right now at M&T Bank Stadium. I'm not sure the Bengals escaped Baltimore with it, with the way that went. And I hate that game with Lamar being awesome, scoring on 4 straight touchdowns and just looking like the MVP, rallying his team back from a 21-7 deficit. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase responding multiple times and saying, no, we are not going to lose our chances of winning the AFC North tonight. And it come down to that final play and it partially get decided by the officials. It's not the only reason, of course. There's a bunch of other stuff we'll get to, but it was a reason. And I hate that because it should have been a clean final play to determine the outcome.
Yeah, the penalty slant was against Baltimore, but Baltimore's like the least disciplined team in the NFL, and the Bengals are one of the most disciplined teams in the NFL. So you should have expected that from a flag-happy crew, and for whatever reason, they decided to swallow flags and whistles. I guess more whistles and flags on that final drive where Joe Burrow's hit in the head twice. Neither is called. Gesicki is clearly held. He flops a little bit, which maybe is why the officials don't throw the flag. I don't know. Maybe they saw the flop and not the initial hold. I don't know how you miss it. It's very blatant. I think
he was doing that because he had been held before and he wasn't getting him. And he's like, all right, fine. Then I'm just going to do it, like show that I'm being held.
It's just another argument in favor of a video assistant for stuff like that, where like I do worry about it in the NFL because there's that whole adage that you could call holding on every play. But for stuff like that, like it clearly impacts the play. That's part of the primary read of the play. It's a high-low with Gesicki and Chase over there, and Burrow comes off it and goes to the other side with Tanner Hudson. Or maybe it's not even the best decision. Maybe he can hang in there and throw it to Jamar Chase. But man, did they have issues with pressure in this game as well. And so when we talk about, there were some blown calls there, and that is a problem, and I don't mean to minimize it because I think that it's blatant. Terry McCauley, who is an official consultant for the Thursday night broadcast, agreed. There's plenty of other things that we could talk about that the Bengals had control over in this game that went wrong, from Chase Brown's fumble to protection issues to the defense wilting in the second half, the offense not taking advantage of when the defense was actually standing up and getting 5 of 6 drives for the Ravens to start this game to end in punts, 4 3-and-outs, 5 3-and-outs, 4 3-and-outs. I mean,
4 3-and-outs, 5 punts. Yeah.
5 punts, 4 3-and-outs
on 6%, the first 6 possessions.
Yeah. Not counting the one that ended the half.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could be on an early Week 11 line in the NFL. There's a theory that teams get a bump from firing a coach, but what happens when they fire a coach and trade one of their best players? FanDuel is kind of buying the fired coach hype, as it feels like the New Orleans Saints aren't as much of an underdog as you might expect to the Atlanta Falcons. The game is in New Orleans, but the FanDuel has the Falcons favored by 3.5 points. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
San Francisco 49ers coming off a bye, well-rested, getting players back, reinforcements.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast.
All right, Croc, well-rested here. We didn't have a game last week. We didn't have a keys to victory. We're going live here post Thursday Night Football on YouTube. First thing in your feeds for the audio listeners on your way to work on Friday morning to get ready, set the weekend off right, and get ready for some more 49ers football here in Week 10 and everything good news. Like
is it Christmas for you? because you drafted a certain player, number 1 overall in the fantasy league, and you missed the guy for the first 2 months of the season, and you had no idea if he was even going to return. And we're hearing he's going to Germany and all these other things, but you got a nice little toy, a nice little shot in the arm to revamp your fantasy football team for the rest of this little regular season.
Look, I'm in the same place the 49ers are right now. And I blame Kyle Shanahan for both the 49ers record and my fantasy record, because a little heads up, my guy, that Christian McCaffrey wasn't going to play at all before you draft him 1.1 in your fantasy league. And not only Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to activate my other guy who's been stashed all year on IR. I've been scraping by with Austin Eckler's and Tank Bigsby's at running back. Jonathan Brooks as well gets activated. So double activations from my fantasy league, Oblong Balls commish, Nick Winkler. You guys, if you know, you listen to Winky Wednesday. He's our commish there. And I don't play I used to write about fantasy football and get paid for it. I play so little fantasy football now. I have very few leagues, and those leagues matter. To be honest with you, the most fun for me nowadays with fantasy football is getting together with old buddies in person and drafting. That's what it's all about. And then everything else that happens the rest of the season is gravy. But hey, better late than never. Christian McCaffrey activated on my team. He hasn't officially been activated, but I already put him in the running back slot. He's in there. He's RB1 for me now. Hasn't officially been activated by the San Francisco 49ers, but everyone from Richard Sherman to Christian McCaffrey himself to Kyle Shanahan, it sounds like he's going to be good to go. And Christian McCaffrey even said that he could have gone in the last game, and now is at an extra 2 weeks on top of that with the bye to get ready to go against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Christian McCaffrey limited again in practice, but it looks like he's had some rigorous weeks as the reports are, and no setbacks with the Achilles tendonitis. Christian McCaffrey primed to make his debut, not only for my fantasy football team, but for the San Francisco 49ers in Week 10 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Key to victory, number 1, be healthy, be full power, right? Juwan Jennings, Jake Moody kicking field goals, looks like for the San Francisco 49ers. John Feliciano coming back for the San Francisco 49ers. Chris Foerster, the 49ers offensive line coach, said that he's not going to jump into the starting lineup either. He's a backup player for the 49ers. So that's what his status is right now. Niners getting healthy. And in fact, Christian McCaffrey, Croc, might be more healthy in Week 10 than Jordan Mason, because Jordan Mason had the blue jersey on Thursday at practice for the 49ers. So he's got that.
And that's the non-contact uniform for those of you who don't know.
Non-contact, not able to touch him. I don't think they wanted defenders to touch Christian McCaffrey either. He's been kind of limited. But so Christian McCaffrey's back. That's the big story of the week for the 49ers.
That is the big story. And I started this off talking about how, your fantasy team got a nice little shot in the arm, adrenaline, get some things going. But I think the 49ers as well got the same thing. This is much needed. This is a team that I'd say if you ask most of the fan base, they weren't expecting the 49ers to be 4-4, at the bye week. And now you have an opportunity to, okay, we're 4-4, but you're in striking range in the NFC West. Luckily, nobody's run away from this division, especially with the Seattle Seahawks starting off 3-0. And I think they're in last place right now. But you're in prime position to be like, all right, we got some guys coming back, getting a little healthier. Christian McCaffrey is going to help us in certain areas, help us in the red zone, help us potentially in the drive efficiency, yards per drive efficiency, yards per play efficiency. And I would say even with Brock Purdy, not the most efficient version of Brock Purdy that we've seen. And I think maybe Christian McCaffrey is a big part of that. So having your safety blanket, having your outlet, and hopefully, again, somebody that's going to help the 49ers in the red zone, this is huge for the 49ers.
Red zone offense is the big one for me. And how much of a difference does Christian McCaffrey make to the red zone offense? Because we've pointed to Christian McCaffrey as potentially one of the reasons. But the 49ers red zone offense has been a little weird, and it's been worse statistically than even pre-Christian McCaffrey. Is Christian McCaffrey enough to just fix all the ills on the San Francisco 49ers? Because vibes are good and players are pumped to have him back. And he's clearly a really good player and is a dynamic player. Is going to help in a lot of ways, run and pass. But is he just like the Band-Aid for everything?
Man, he helps a lot. And the biggest thing is how much better is he than the guys that are replacing him? And what does that look like? And we've seen guys get yards, right? Grindle, he's run for a good amount of yards in games. We've seen Jordan Mason. And Jordan Mason, he did a terrific job in the replacement of Christian McCaffrey. But I think there's certain, it's situational football where a guy like Christian McCaffrey helps you more so than anything else. So I think that's the place right there where you talk about putting a Band-Aid on things, but I think they kind of got surgery a little bit, healed up, and now you have a guy that's going to really inject a little bit more into the offense.
I mean, Jordan Mason's still the 4th leading rusher in the NFL right now. So, like, yards per carry is not the thing that really is a problem currently, or is going to be the thing that Christian McCaffrey fixed. And yards per carry might not change a lot with Christian McCaffrey. But
I think that's like situational though, right? Like
yeah.
I think of a quarterback who throws for a lot of yards, but then when you look at when he's throwing for these yards, it's garbage time, or in games when they're just behind and they don't have a chance to win the ball game, right? You see that a lot sometimes with quarterbacks. So Jordan Mason, a bunch of yards, but if it's not in games that's going to help you win more, right? Like you would hope for, okay, we got 4th leading rusher in the NFL. Give me a little bit of what Baltimore has, which tonight, I don't know if you guys watched the game, it was a shootout, amazing performances from both Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. But, you know, Derrick Henry, if he's going to be the league leading rusher, like let me have that record where I know that you're leading and it's not empty yardage that you're getting. And I'm not saying that with Jordan Mason, but it has felt like the bulk of him having the big games is like, okay, yeah, good, you won. But in other games where you're running well, but man, we lost a few of these ball games.
Yeah, and we talked about this with some of the breakaway runs and plays, and the 49ers only have 2 20-plus yard touchdowns this season. Last year, all season long, they're well behind the pace. They had 15 last year. And so, you know, they're well behind even the half a season pace for long touchdown runs. And so finishing the job, getting into the end zone, finishing big plays. Christian McCaffrey's so good in small areas too. So, and I see it touched on in the chat here as well. The gravity, the attention that Christian McCaffrey brings for defensive coordinators and what you're able to do. Kyle Shanahan loves having those players that can do everything. Christian McCaffrey, and it's why he loves Kyle Juszczyk. And you have to play the 49ers a certain way when they have these guys on the field. And then Kyle Shanahan knows that, so then he can turn 21 personnel into 11 personnel really quick, right? And then he can go the other way as well. And all of a sudden, Deebo Samuel's back there. And so you have 2 guys that can be running backs and wide receivers, and you got another guy who can be a tight end or a fullback or a running back, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield, and George Kittle can pancake you, and he can make plays as well. So it really just adds an element, and it does add a little bit everywhere to have Christian McCaffrey back. And yeah, you might not see it in the yards per carry, but I think you see it in the margins. And that's where Christian McCaffrey is going to help, and it's going to help a little bit everywhere. That's the way I look at it with Christian McCaffrey. And it's why he's one of the run. And remember, Croc, I'm the West Coast chairman of Running Backs Don't Matter. You see guys like Christian McCaffrey. We've seen it this year from Saquon Barkley, who was a free agent. Anybody could have signed him. He ends up in Philadelphia. Derrick Henry, anybody could have signed him. He ended up in Baltimore. And you see these guys, you're like, yeah, there's a few guys that do make a difference. And Christian McCaffrey's one of those guys.
I got a DM on Instagram about you not liking running backs, and they said, forget what Peacock says, we need to draft Gentry. So, or Genty, the running back from Boise State.
Oh, look, if he's there, I'm not going to put it past Kyle Shanahan to draft another running back. And it's been more resources on running back. It's more about the resources spent than like you want to have good running backs. That's not it. It's more about the resources. Like, look, the guy that was not drafted by any team, all 32 teams, including the 49ers, is still 4th in the league in rushing right now in Jordan Mason. But yeah, Christian McCaffrey's better. Welcome back, Christian McCaffrey. If he does indeed play, we're acting like he's going to play. He hasn't officially been activated, but all signs pointing to Christian McCaffrey coming back